Welcome to the AME Food Testing Show. Today's topic, food safety audits, one element in a food safety program with Dr. Douglas Powell, Professor, Food Safety, Department Diagnostic Medicine, Pathobiology, Kansas State University. Doug Powell, food scientist and creator of an online repository of food safety related information, joined K-State as an associate professor in the College of Veterinary Medicine's Department of Diagnostic Medicine and Pathobiology in May 2006. He was promoted to full professor in 2011. Powell is among a collection of individuals who passionately care about reducing the burden of foodborne illnesses and who seek innovative ways to compel everyone on the farm-to-fork safety system, individual producers, retail employees, and consumers, among others, to acknowledge and adopt practices to reduce the risk of food-borne illnesses. He also teaches food safety courses in risk analysis, policy, communications, and culture. Under Powell's supervision, researchers and students conduct research, provide commentary, policy evaluation, and public information on a range of food safety issues such as the safety of fresh fruits and vegetables, restaurant inspection disclosure systems, and human behavior. The information is available at online repositories like barfblog.com, a forum for musing about current food safety issues, where he has written more than 5,000 entries since 2006. Powell also conducts research on food safety risk analysis, especially whether food safety information is having its intended effect of influencing the practices of consumers and those in the food industry. He co-authored the book in 1997, Mad Cows and Mother's Milk, The Perils of Poor Risk Communication, which exposes case studies where institutions fail to communicate the scientific bases of high-profile risks in food safety. Among the cases discussed are the 1996 mad cow disease outbreak in Britain and the emergence of E. coli in hamburger in the early 1990s. He's also published more than 60 peer-reviewed papers and book chapters and has served on national and international food safety advisory boards. Now welcome, Dr. Douglas Powell.
Hi, Andy.
Dr. Powell, would you like to update us on any of your other current activities?
Currently, I'm continuing all those activities. I post regularly to barfblog.com. We continue to conduct research. I have grad students supplanted around the world, and I'm living in Brisbane, Australia. But I'm a professor at Kansas State University.
Very good. Just to inform our audience, we are communicating via Skype, which at times has its breaks in communication. But today's topic, let's begin with what is a food safety audit?
A food safety audit depends almost on what you want it to be. I started with on-farm food safety evaluations back about 1997 when I had just become a professor and was introduced to the Ontario greenhouse vegetable growers in Ontario, Canada. And they had a very bright general manager who said, we got to be careful about any salmonella in that because we're getting really successful at trade with the U.S. And if you look, the U.S. greenhouse vegetable growers for a long time dominated the East Coast in the U.S. And he said, they're going to start looking for salmonella, and we really don't want that. And my recurring nightmare is someone calls me up from some store in Georgia or somewhere, and it's like, I got a customer here who says they got sick, and it's your tomatoes. What do we do about it? Now, at the time, there'd been a bunch of produce-related outbreaks, cyclospora in what was originally thought California strawberries, but turned out to be Guatemalan raspberries, E. coli 0157 and Odwalla juice. That was 96. FDA was getting more into. There was a whole real push onto fresh fruit and vegetable safety. And these guys were really proactive and brought me in. To get back to your question, what's a food safety audit? I don't know. There's first party, second party, third party. It really depends on what you want. And what's happened over the years as I've watched this evolve is it seems to have gone from being science or evidence-based to whatever I can do to get my product on the shelves is sort of a condition of sale.
So the minimalist approach would be, what is the absolute bottom line that I need to do to get that piece of paper? Is that what you're saying?
In a third-party audit, that can happen. We've certainly seen examples of that. Um, Audits certainly have a role simply because so much food moves around. It's not a chain, it's more of like this big ball of intersecting things just moving around, ingredients all over the place. So you're going to need auditors because you can't have your own people everywhere. But what I argue and what we argued in our recent paper was that if you're going to rely on that minimalist piece of paper, you should at least have someone in-house who knows to ask the right questions and have some food safety knowledge. Because what I've found over the 15 years of doing this is that lots of people can talk a good game about food safety, but when it comes down to it, it comes down to price. And people are going to make those decisions and those trade-offs and hope they never get caught.
Well, Dr. Powell, you bring an interesting point. Is a third-party audit or inspection enough to guard against pathogen contamination?
We argued in our recent paper that it was not, that it was an additional tool, and that any company that relies solely on that by saying, oh, well, we're inspected by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or we had a third-party audit. Any company that promotes that as their measure of safety should really be looking at themselves. That it's not enough. In fact, what I would argue is the only way to bring more accountability into the system is to be able to market food safety at retail. Because right now, if I'm a consumer and I go to Walmart, Costco, Kroger, any place, the farmer's market, and I want to get spinach or lettuce or tomatoes that are microbiologically safe or produced in a microbiologically safe way. You can't get rid of everything, but that's advertised as being produced under some sort of microbiologically sound guide. I can't find that anywhere.
Dr. Douglas, you raise a fascinating issue. As a matter of fact, one of my clients who is going through extreme measures to reduce micro load factors wants to advertise, and much attracting the organic and highly sensitive market, and obviously willing to pay more, with a label that would say our product has been screened or surveilled for contamination. What's your response to that sort of initiative?
I'm all for it because I've worked with a lot of farmers and a lot of farm organizations over the past 15 years. And there are some outstanding performers out there in the field that really go out of their way. They should be rewarded for their endeavors and for their activities. But at retail, I have no way of telling when I put on my consumer hat. And I spend a lot of time just hanging out in supermarkets and talking with people. I see labels for everything else: local, natural, sustainable, organic, dolphin-free, There's all sorts of things out there. But I can't get what actually would help in reducing the burden of food-borne illness, and that is something microbiologically safe. And I don't know how best to label it. I'm not the lawyer. I'm not the marketer. But if the U.S. is good as anything, it's figuring out how to market stuff.
Agreed. Well, let's talk for a minute. What are the particular verification processes of product and process systems? How can companies and consumers know about the safety of the products?
Well, for companies, they need to rely on more than just paperwork. When we started with these greenhouse vegetable growers, and this spread into tender fruit growers and fruit and vegetable growers all over the place. You know, we designed a system where it wasn't just someone just showing up to audit it and completing a checklist. We did a few things that we found based on research and based on our own experience, where we made the person who was doing it an employee of that marketing board, so that they were viewed as help to the farmer rather than outside surveillance. We included microbiological testing to verify that they said that they were doing what they said they were doing. Just simple things like dump tank water quality or end product testing. You don't find much, but if you do, then you need to clean it up. And swabs can give you a good indication if there's problems. Those sorts of things got lost in the early 2000s when the retailers said, we're going to go to this third-party audit system more and more. And GFSI came along, Global Food Safety Initiative, to try and consolidate all these audit platforms, because the farmers were rightly frustrated that, you know, I get an auditor from McDonald's for my tomatoes, and then next week I got someone from Burger King, and they both want to check. And they both are just asking the same questions. So they wanted some sort of unification. I don't know. But I think the point is, what's lost by going to this strict audit system is it's an outside evaluation, but the coaching aspect got lost. What we found, and we've written papers about this before, is that most growers want to do the right thing, but they don't want to necessarily become microbiologists. They want to know, okay, I have this potential problem, tell me what to do. And they need someone on the phone or on the email right away, even if it's 3 in the morning, to do that, rather than scheduling a visit to the farm. And we found that sort of collaborative relationship really helpful in gaining trust and buy-in and helping everyone encourage. But retailers went ahead and said, no, we just want an outsider third-party audit piece of paper. So if that's the way you're going to go, and I understand there's a role for it, I would argue you better make sure you have someone in-house who can assess that and knows what they're talking about.
Well, Dr. Douglas, our audience of this show is primarily food production, food quality, food safety, and food security managers. Many times in a smaller organization, all of those duties will be plopped onto one person who, quite frankly, is not qualified. Their training and their experience has primarily been on food production, how to get a box out of the factory for X number of pennies in cost so they can maximize the revenue. When the assignment of walking a food auditor around or a food safety officer or inspector, it is pretty much felt as a burden on that production. What would be your response to that type of organization?
Andy, I agree, and I've seen that, and that was one of our really beneficial roles, was to have one of our people there to walk around when they got an outside audit, because raising questions is always a good thing. And the producer wouldn't necessarily know what questions to raise, but we would. And we made sure there's always someone there. So I think that there's opportunities for smaller businesses, smaller organizations that don't have the human resources to have a person devoted to this, to tap into the market and have an outside consultant pool it together, in the same way that, you know, farmers don't need a combine sitting in the barn for 50 weeks of the year and 2 weeks out on the wheat field. They can pool their resources and tap into it when they need it.
Well, Dr. Douglas, you've seen a lot of these systems, and we're primarily focusing on the microbiological element of food safety in the production environment. Wouldn't you agree that good manufacturing practices is also in combination with an environmental testing program? Wouldn't you think those two elements would contribute to the overall food safety of a food production facility?
Yes, but it would also depend on how much that end product was being processed. We're talking largely about fruits and vegetables today. So if it's a whole tomato or a whole cantaloupe, You need GMPs in terms of water quality, soil amendments, and human hygiene, but it's not going to, and especially because it's not going to undergo any further processing.
Are there any other steps that food producers can take to assure safe food?
When you look at the outbreaks that pop up almost weekly around the world, and I've been doing that for 20 years now, there aren't too many that are acts of God. When you get in and dig them out, they're usually the culmination of a series of small missteps that accumulated into often a tragic outbreak that could have been prevented. So there's not one special magic bullet. If there was, what I would...
Hold please. Give me a call. Okay, go ahead. Can you hear me? Oh, I will delete that out. Go ahead, Dr. Douglas. Dr. Powell.
What we argue is that creating a food safety culture, whether you're a small farm, a huge professor, whatever it is, creating a culture that values microbiologically safe food is probably your best insurance about producing safe food day in, day out. Yes, you need GMPs. Yes, you need HACCP plans. Yes, you need all the standard stuff. But none of that is going to prevent someone who doesn't wash their hands when they go to the bathroom. Only the culture will prevent that. And I want to get food from a place where if two people go to the bathroom and one of them comes out and doesn't wash their hands, I want that other employee to say, dude, wash your hands, because we're going out and handling fresh fruit that no one else is going to touch until they buy it.
Well, Dr. Powell, that's an excellent point. How does an organization develop a food safety culture?
Well, if I knew that, I guess I'd be very wealthy. But there are some indicators that are emerging in the literature. It starts with the example at the top. So the bosses have to value it, and not just the head of food safety or food quality or the other titles you said earlier. It really has to be valued at the very highest level, and not just in sound bites where they say, food safety is our number one priority, because everyone says that, but they don't actually mean it. You need to reinforce it through a combination of carrots and sticks, both positive and detrimental things. So you do something bad, you get fined or whatever. You do something good, you're encouraged, you promote it. You need to be very creative in your communication about these things. We've had decades of food safety messaging that says employees must wash their hands, or keep hot food hot and cold food cold. Well, those are all important, but no one pays attention to them. You have to understand who your workforce is, because anyone is only as good as their frontline employees. And it's your worst frontline employee, because that's all you need for a mistake to happen and an outbreak to happen. So how do you reach them? So what we do through Barf Blog is try and use a mixture of pop culture and food science. And we have some evidence that that works a little. It's very difficult to evaluate these things, but we use observational video, and we have seen changes in behavior by targeting to what people are interested in. But really, a lot of it just goes back to spending the time and knowing who you're working with and what they care about, rather than just dictating from high on above. So all of those things would contribute to a positive food safety culture. And I think more importantly, if you could then market it at retail, then you'd have a really clear message back to the employees. This is why we wash our hands, because we're bragging about it at retail.
Dr. Powell, you have raised some excellent points. Number one, I'd like to review that food safety comes from the top down, not from the bottom up. A line employee says, I think I should wash my hands. That rarely happens. It's generally from the top down as an enforcement. And I like the stick and carrot idea. That's very helpful. The development of a culture is a long and painful process. Are there any measures to show progress in food safety culture?
The measures would be things like, well, the measures are pretty rudimentary at this point. Actually, the UK Food Standards Authority is working right now to develop some metrics so that these things can be measured, because food safety culture in a matter of 4 years has become a phrase that's tossed around routinely and no one really knows what it means. Um, you can measure it in little pieces like with hand washing compliance, but you can only really do that with observation. The other methods aren't so good. You can measure it in just awareness and conversation, but a lot of that's anecdotal. Like, we produce these info sheets every week that are 8.5 by 11 that can be taped in the back of a bathroom stall or in the kitchen. And we've had dozens of companies around the US come up
Dr. Powell?
to us, because we've been doing this for 10 years, and say, this is what we use for our training, and we know it's effective because they talk about it at the lunch table, and it's just a matter of telling stories rather than becoming an expert on the difference between Staphylococcus and Bacillus or E. coli. So how best to measure, I don't know. We're working on it.
So that website reference again is?
My website, everything's at barfblog.com.
Very good.
Because
you have
food-borne, they barf.
So you have free information there that people are allowed to download and use in their organizations.
There's a section called Info Sheets, and anyone can use it, and tens of thousands of people do.
Outstanding. Well, Dr. Powell, we have certainly enjoyed your contribution. I'd like to allow you closure on this topic and summary for food production, food quality, food safety, and food risk managers or security managers. And if you can summarize our topic on what is a food safety audit.
A food safety audit is something that should, whether you run it yourself or whether an outsider does it, make sure that they're using real tools to evaluate you. And yes, you should lose sleep over it, because it affects people's lives day in, day out. And we see that in the media reports every day.
Very good. Dr. Powell, would you like to summarize any other projects or programs that you're involved in? You're currently down in Australia.
I'm down here because my wife got a professoring job at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, and I really like the weather. And for me, I do all my work electronically, both teaching and research. I have students around the world. We designed a restaurant inspection disclosure system for New Zealand, another project up in Winnipeg, Canada. So I make the argument that if you want the best people, geography isn't really that much of a factor. And if you need face-to-face, we can get it. Otherwise, we just hook up via the internet. So I'm really looking at exploring into massive open online courses to really spread the food safety gospel to tens of thousands of people rather than 10 at a time.
Well, Dr. Powell, if you have an agenda on your course offerings, I'd invite you maybe to follow back with a show and outline those for us on another interview. I think it'd be fascinating for our listenership.
As soon as I figure it out, I'd be interested to see how it turns out too.
Very good. Well, Dr. Powell, I'd really like to express my appreciation for your appearance on the show and invite you back in a future date, particularly with the course offerings and any other topics that you might find helpful in your research.
Great, Andy. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day or evening, wherever you may be.